to be a number of deals that have gotten done over the last 2 days. So very much looking forward to that. I think we're going to start us off. We might be hearing some rumors very quickly around the league. Some of our esteemed baseball analysts in the field might have some insight onto what's going on. Zach, anything you can report on that end?
Yeah, so Ken Rosenthal put out this tweet earlier today, just talking about the deadline. Um, Pitching is rolling the deadline. Teams are heavy after arms, both starting and relief. Teams are finding it difficult to navigate the deadline. Sellers are little budget crunch, both sellers and buyers. Not many teams have money to work with. Those that do kind of have a leg up on everybody. And the sellers finding it hard to retain on players that buyers want retainment on. And then transitioning, we also got some predictions from everybody's favorite beat writer, Bob Nightingale. Tyler, if you want to go over them.
Well, I'm sure they're accurate as he usually is. So we got Givatoski going from Miami out west to the Dodgers. We got a very interesting move in Yordan Alvarez going to the Mets. Mets not really in contending mode this year, so that'd be a fun one. We got Keisuke Hirano staying in division, going to the Red Sox. Escorche going from San Diego to the Yanks. Ray going to the Spiders and what would be a big arm for them. And then Sandy Severino staying put, it appears, with the Reds. So a great breaking news there from Nightingale on that last one.
Nightingale predicting a lot of non-contenders buyers this year.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's Boob at his best.
He really does it well. All right, so let's get into some of the teams. We're gonna kind of highlight what some of these buyers could be looking for. Let's start with the AL East. In about all of these divisions, it's about half the teams are in the hunt, about half out of it. So, Dan, talking through those top four in the AL East, kind of what do you think they're looking for, and what's the state of that division?
All right, thanks Tyler for the kick out. Looking at the AL East, we got a clear number one right now who has the second best record in all of baseball, Montreal. If you look over Montreal's roster, they're pretty set on almost all positions. They could use a few minor upgrades. Thing that stood out to me is they don't really have that backup shortstop, so I was thinking I would keep an eye out on that. Not that you want to jinx Luke Leto getting injured, the great Luke Leto, but figured they'd probably want someone that could kind of take over in the middle of the field pretty well. And any good team, when they're that good, you can just really never have enough elite relievers. They already have probably the best bullpen in baseball, and no team is flawless. But if you look at them, they're a team that you just never have enough, absolute bulls in the back of the bullpen there. So a couple guys to go in the end. They have a lot of lefties in the rotation, which I like. I know they were talking about moving Austin Cox, so that's a big thing to look out for today. The three lefties in the starting rotation, so potentially him or Josh Jewell will be on the move. That's a big one to look out on that he gave us a warning on. But yeah, that team is really close to just being like almost perfectly put together. They don't have a lot of moves they really have to make, as many as these next few teams. If you look at Boston right now is in second place on my sim. I don't know after the results of these last 4 games, but Boston is a team I'm expecting to be one of the most active today. If you look at Boston's got kind of a weakness, not a huge weakness, but a little weakness in left field. They're not nearly as good as they are in the infield. Left field, the corner spots, right and left, are a little bit weaker. Adames there in right field's having a pretty good year. But if you look, they're all lefty bats except for Dunn. So I'd imagine they're going to be looking for something, maybe to get an impact righty bat or something along the lines there. And then also big injury to one of their best players, Monegro, in the infield. I think they can survive that one pretty easily, because they have a pretty good backup second baseman there. A couple guys on the roster that can also play the position pretty well, but wouldn't be shocked to see them bring in one more maybe big bat in the infield, but definitely something to keep an eye on there. And they also have a lot of solid pitchers. They don't really have that second or third ace, so Jack Leiter's pretty big pickup, but yeah, again, any team with pitching can always get better. No team is really ever perfect when it comes to pitching, but definitely something from the bats to look out for them. Next up, we have Cleveland. Cleveland is contending the real good record here. Cleveland has a lot of huge bats and a lot of good bullpen pieces, and they're probably a little I thought talent-wise they're a little closer to Montreal than the record indicates, so I'd imagine they'll start playing hot in the second half. I know they were talking about moving a lot of their big pieces. We'll see if any of those moves come to fruition. Capelli, I know they're trying to open up a spot in left field there for some young guys coming up, so that one I wasn't too sure on. Again, you can always maybe bring some more movement in that bullpen. If you look at that bullpen, you see a lot of 50 and 40 movement guys, so that's another spot you can kind of improve on, but that one's a little tricky to predict for me. And then lastly, we have Detroit. Detroit is right in the middle there. They're really competing hard for that last wild card, and Nick has a pretty good squad. The pitching's really underperforming right now. The position players are playing pretty well. The outfielders are kind of underperforming a bit on the corners, just like Boston, so I think they'll be in competition with Boston for some of those big names. They have some good players. The Haxel's just really underperforming a little bit this season, so we'll see what he does there. But I think pitching-wise, they'll probably want to maybe make a splash. They have some good ratings, but yeah, for whatever reason, the guys are just not playing quite up to snuff so far. But I'd expect them to have a pretty big second half, as I think those pitchers will bounce back, especially with that rookie coming up, Mason. So really interesting to see what happens there. But my big prediction would probably be Boston to be the biggest movers today, but who knows? I could be totally wrong on that. So that's it for the AL East. I'll kick it back to Tyler here.
Yep. No, thanks, Dan. That was good insight. Moving over to the other half of the league, a lot of guys you're probably in competition with for this last wild card or two wild card spots, Nick. But talk to me about the AL West.
Well, the AL West, you have two very dominant teams up top, two regular contenders. The first place right now is still the Brewers, right? Yeah. They're they don't have many holes this year. Well, they don't have many holes most year. One of the very, very best teams in the league. Very little holes. One thing that Dan touched on that I think I saw when I looked into some teams across the league is a lot of teams could upgrade their corner outfield spots. Maybe that has just turned into a weaker position in the league. But I believe the Brewers, they have a promising young player in junior at Sorelli, and he's having a good year. But that's a spot where they could really get an impact bat. Although I don't think there are many on the market this year. Some names entered the block a little late over the weekend, so it'll be interesting to see if there were a player there. They're also one of the very few contenders that actually has some money to work with. There's really only 3 or 4 teams with actual money to spend, and none of them have very much. And outside of simply adding depth to the Brewers, I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't even active today with a roster like that. And their key rival and longtime dominant team, the Colorado Rockies. Yet again, another team with not many weaknesses. And like Milwaukee and some of the teams that Dan mentioned, they could upgrade their corner outfield spots. One spot that I think they could play around with, it'll be interesting to see if they do, is I think they'd be an interesting spot for Alexander Vargas particularly. And Rockies already have one of the best defenses in the league, and that would probably take them to the next level. That would allow them to put Lewis back at second where they've played him in the past. And they could use Vinny Moreno as more of a Ben Zobrist super util guy. I think that would be a really interesting move for them. Outside of that, I know the Rockies are pretty much always in the market to upgrade their bullpen, so we'll see if they were aggressive on that front. And also done with that. I think the Rockies will make some moves. I'd be surprised if they make a big move this year. And then one of the wild card contenders, Minnesota Twins. They're an interesting team that I could see being very active. I wouldn't say they are really great in any one area, but they're not really weak anywhere. They're really just solid across the board. Really only one thing that they do really excellent is run the bases. So if they could upgrade a few spots, I would imagine they would. and they, as just shown, they just had a injury to one of their best players, Jonathan Clase. It'll be interesting to see if they made a move to replace him on short notice. But with his injury history, honestly, they just have to be prepared for that. One of the names that comes to my mind is former Tiger Mario Zavala, who is just about as good defensively as Clase, and he would be an interesting fit there to plug that hole in the meantime.
All right, Tyler, we're going to head to the Twitter sphere real quick. We got a tweet from John Heyman, if you want to take it over.
Sure. So Atlanta apparently in the market for a move, trading Luis Matos and Mike Barnes to Baltimore, along with the prospect Luis Rivera, for an absolute bottle job of a prospect, just to have somebody go the other way, Luis Ramirez. So Atlanta looking to clear up some money in that move. Luis Matos, a reunion in Baltimore, that's nice and fun. So good to see my ex-Giant back there. But it appears that deal is official now. So we have our first deal of the deadline. Atlanta just freeing up some space in what I imagine is a move to try to do something else. But it seems like not a lot of talent. Mike Barnes was starting a lot of games for Atlanta at first base. So if anything, maybe they're in the market for a first baseman, it appears. All right. Let's transition back to the NL side of things while we keep getting these interjected throughout. Over to the NL East, a lot of contenders there, Dan. A lot of teams in the hunt right now. What are your thoughts on breaking down those top few quickly?
All right. So, jumping over to the NL East, you said?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so in the NL East, we have a pretty nice group of teams here. Philadelphia's really pulled ahead. Philadelphia's roster is pretty loaded. Major power all across the lineup there. The one thing that kind of caught my eye when I first looked is I think they could probably use a big upgrade at second base. That was one of the ones that I kind of thought off the top of my head. They're pretty loaded every other position. They got really good elite left fielder, power bats all across. Robert Puason is very, very top level at shortstop there. And I guess I was thinking that move more so before I noticed Arias was playing a little bit there, but I think Arias is so good, he kind of rotates between second, first, and DH. I thought maybe Vargas, that's another guy I thought might be a good pick there for a trade, because I think that would really upgrade their second base. But again, these top teams are so loaded, all these teams with like almost 70 win percentages. They don't have a ton of holes. I think Philadelphia has kind of put together the starting rotation almost as well as anyone. They got three really impact guys that are killing it this season with over 2 wars already. So real sorry, did I just freeze there? Yeah, real nice roster there. So Philadelphia, I wouldn't expect a ton of moves, but wouldn't surprise me there if they brought in one more bat there, defensive specialist type. Next up, we have Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is real tricky to me to predict anything. Pittsburgh has a very solid rotation that has a bunch of number 3 or 2s type starters. Don't have a ton of crazy impact, like surefire aces you want to throw out there for game 1 of the World Series type or game 7, but they don't really have a big weak spot either. So that's kind of tricky to upgrade, because you can't really just upgrade it by bringing in another number 2 or 3. Like when you have a rotation full of number 2 and 3 types, the only way to really upgrade is bringing in that elite, like Jacob deGrom type talent, like surefire ace. So a little tough to upgrade there unless they're to bring in one of the big guns from the trade deadline here, like Jivotowski. Hitting side of things too, real interesting situation come up in the offseason with Pacheco and Howard both potentially opting out. I don't think Howard will opt out of the season he's having, but he could always bring in someone that wouldn't just be good for this year, but multiple years in the middle of the field if they were planning to let one of those guys go. But I don't really see it. They're both very good, and I don't think he let Pacheco walk. So that's something where I had a tough time predicting. I noticed they put one of their better players on the trade deadline right at the end there, and Ghazali actually. I noticed he put him up in the block. So we'll see if anyone bites on that. They do have a lot of outfield depth, so maybe he was just kind of fishing for a move. But Ghazali is a guy that could help a lot of teams in the corner outfield. As me and Nick both mentioned earlier, a lot of teams seem to have that question mark on the trade block. But yeah, Pittsburgh has really good depth at a lot of places, so no outstanding big needs, but could always bring in a couple big impact players. And next up, we have Atlanta. So Atlanta here, Kamish's team, real good squad that won the World Series last year. They have a really impact outfield right now in Acuna, Adele, Elliot Ramos. Kirilloff is doing a lot of DHing. Jordan Walker's playing a lot better this year. So position player wise, they're just stacked. Absolutely awesome lineup. You could always use number 2 catcher upgrade. Their number 2 catcher looks pretty solid though, but just anywhere you can kind of make minor improvements when you're that good of a team, I think helps. They probably could also use a number 1 starter, kind of like Pittsburgh, where they that's the one thing. Mackenzie Gore has taken a bit of regression this season, and then Soroka kind of fell off and got injured for the year, and he got old. So I think they don't really have that ace they had last year. Eric Bear is pretty close though. He's pretty solid, but I think they could also use a big gun to potentially bring in like a number 1 type starter. And then also in the bullpen, they're pretty loaded. All these teams seem to have really good bullpens, a kind of a common denominator between all the top teams, but that's a move they could always make. I'd keep an eye on them for bringing in one of the top guns there, arm-wise. And then next up we have Chicago Cubs. So Chicago's at 56 wins here. They have the last spot of the playoffs locked up so far, about 2/3 of the way through the season. Chicago just had a big injury to Taylor Trammell. Luckily, they had some other guys that can play left field there, like Austin Hendricks, I think, was DHing, so he can kind of fill in there. They could always use a big shortstop. I think that's a big weakness. Nico Horner, if you look at Nico, he has a -7 zone range. Not a great defensive shortstop by FTD standards. So I think he's a guy that they could upgrade and push him to second base. So another team to look out for a top shortstop going there. Also, Aaron Sabato's pretty solid at first base, but you could always, there's a couple big first basemen on the block that have big time impact bats, like Tuzio, a couple other guys, and Nashville's guys, so I think they could always be someone to look out for if we bring in a big first baseman. And then last off, we also have a Tampa there in the thick of things. Tampa has a really loaded roster that's had a couple big injuries this year, and Vladdy and Franco, so they're both coming back healthy. Roster-wise, they're real good. They just could probably not use many upgrades in the bullpen either. Their bullpen's about as good as it gets. Just a ton of guys with high-impact stuff and good control ratings too, right across the board there. Pitching wise, side of things, they're pretty good too. They're all pretty consistent starters. As you can see, all their ERAs and FIPS are pretty good, like right in the middle of the threes. So another really talented team that just kind of has to stay healthy. Don't look for them to make a ton of big moves. If they do, it's possible, I guess, they could upgrade the outfield a little bit, but not by much. Maybe just bring in like a platoon bat or something. But don't see a lot of movement out of Tampa today, but we'll see if that stays true.
Thanks, Dan. Yep, and I think we can transition over to the NL West. Might be a short list for you here, Nick.
Tyler, before you get going, we got a deal coming in. St. Louis has acquired relief pitcher Joe Engelbrecht from the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox figured to be busy today in exchange for a couple of prospects.
Yep, Engelbrecht's has a lot of back end time for them. So that's an interesting ad for the White Sox. You know, there was a couple bigger relievers out there on the board. I don't think he quite made our top 25 list, but a solid arm nonetheless. Not familiar with those prospects at all, but I'm sure it's just a pretty mediocre return for what's a solid reliever. But Cardinals looking at bullpen help, and just how Dan mentioned, bullpens are kind of an indicator of these strong teams. So any strength there is always good. All right, Nick, want to wrap us up? Might be short. Giants stink, but there's 2 good teams at the top of the West for sure. So I want to talk to us about them.
Yeah, they're both really good too. Kind of the theme of most of the teams I talked about. Dodgers finally back. They're looking great this year. They've had a recent minor injury to Lucio Baudet. They could bring in a guy to man center field while he's out. He's only out a couple weeks. The name that came to my mind is, again, Mario Zavala. Elite defensively. The Dodgers have one of the best offenses in the league. So bringing in a defensive guy who could transition into your fourth outfielder and could play a key role in a pinch, and has had some very good seasons lately. He probably wouldn't cost too much. I believe he is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So he's obviously a guy will be interested to see if he is moved today. Another spot where I think the Dodgers could make a move. I don't know if they will today or not, but I think they could get a bigger impact of a bat at first base. Gunnar Henderson's had an all right year, but that's a position where typically you really want a middle of the order power force. And their main division rival this year is the St. Louis Cardinals. Yet another team with not many holes, one of the best pitching staffs in the league. It looked like bringing in Engelbrecht. We'll see if they do anything other than that. They don't really have any injuries on their team besides a 39-year-old Bryce Harper. The Cardinals are typically active. I don't know if they'll make a big move. I don't necessarily think they have to. But we'll see how it plays out. And like Tyler said, the Giants stink.
They really do. It's really been disappointing. They don't deserve any time on this cast.
Tyler, before
right.
you get going, we'll get another trade in. The Nashville Outlaws have sent left-handed pitcher Brandon Barriera to the Atlanta Braves in exchange for reliever Chris Ulrich.
Nice. The Outlaws have a couple good relievers. Barriera, one of the two big lefties they have. He's pitched a lot of innings for them this year, and he's really good. So, like that, teams adding to their bullpens early, and excited to see where this keeps going. So, with that, we're kind of through the contenders, and they saw a couple days ago we posted our top 25 players. Dan, starting with you, anyone specifically you have necessarily or maybe a strong feeling about moving or any potential landing spots for one of the guys on the list?
All right. Sorry, just give me a second. I'll pull up the list here on my end. Yeah, so I thought at the top, I think Evan White was a name I put real high. Evan White, I thought. Sorry, I'm checking. I'm not muted, right?
Hope you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought Evan White, the Nashville outfielder, I put him personally in the top 5 on my list because I think he brings a ton of versatility, being able to play left field at a really high level and first base at like a top level, best first base defender in probably generation. And FTD's a bunch of Gold Gloves there, and also has a pretty big bat and a righty bat, and also like we talked about, a corner outfielder. So I think of anyone, I'd probably put him at the highest odds of being traded, especially as an expiring 36-year-old contract. Guys definitely has a big chance of being moved. And a couple other names at the top. I think Jivakovsky, I think at number 1, real talented. Miami doesn't necessarily have to move him, but he's getting real expensive for their small payroll. So I think he's a guy that has maybe, if I had to guess, about 40% chance of moving. And I think it looked like Oakland's pretty motivated to move Ray. And then I think my other favorite to get moved was Vargas. I thought, as Nick broke down a few teams that need shortstop help and second base help, he provides an elite defensive talent at both those spots, so I think he could really help a lot of teams. So those are kind of my top 3, I'd say, most likely to move.
Nick, how about you? Outside of number 23, Mario Zabala, anyone stick out to you on this list?
Well, Dylan Ray will be one of the more interesting names on the market, being the best pitcher, well, besides Givkowski, but we'll see if he gets moved since he's still under control. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Alexander Vargas. If I didn't have Rafael Morel, I think Detroit would have been all over that. Those are definitely the names that stick out to me the most.
There's really a lot of starting pitching help on this list at the top, right? I mean, I think there's probably a pretty high likelihood a guy like Omar Fernandez gets moved just because of, being that high movement profile. A lot of teams could use it for their stadiums. Cheap contract, which, with a lot of teams a little hamstrung financially, makes a lot of sense. And, maybe he's like a fringe playoff starter. He's probably a 4th or, could be a 3rd starter in the playoffs, but he should get a lot of love too. So a lot of names on this list, some with some salaries that might be unattainable. You look at Escorche, Jordan, Hirano, might be tough for teams to work out that, but a lot of guys who can be pretty high leverage. So with that, Zach, we hearing anything else?
Yeah, the Cincinnati Reds made the first deal of their deadline. They sent infielder Gabriel Arias to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for Jose Quezada and pitcher Kevin Wood.
Already talking about Cubs needing some infield help. already, so they go out and get that with Arias. Red's always active on this show, so it's good to see them go out and address what's a pretty obvious need for them. Maybe could have shot a little higher for a Vargas or a Jacob Gonzalez type, but Arias is solid and should help to plug that hole a little bit. Any other thoughts on that deal?
I'm just looking at it now. Looks like Kevin Wood is a 19-year-old two-pitch reliever with some solid movement there, kind of a lottery pick. With Arias, you get a 32-year-old expiring deal, but he also has 1-year team control left at $5 million. So, a guy that can kind of plug in at shortstop or second. Pretty nice fit, I'd say. Just looking at the rest of the return here on my end. Get Kevin Wood, and what was the other gentleman's name there?
Jose Quezada, outfielder.
Yeah, so a couple guys that are not top 100 prospect types, but pretty solid. Just might as well get something there. The Reds are kind of rebuilding, don't need those veterans around, so always nice to get a couple little pieces that could turn into something one day.
The deals are kind of starting to flow in as we near the deadline. Maybe a name that nobody's mentioned yet. And a team we already talked about, the Colorado Rockies, they've acquired Jeff Ertz from the Miami Marlins, lefty reliever, in exchange for Ed Rivera and Jose Montano.
Yeah, he's. I think he was the closer, if I'm not mistaken, for the Marlins all this year. I think
29 saves already.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I remember looking at that pin. He had a good bit of control, I believe, too. I think he's still in arbitration. Yeah, the market for these lefty relievers is going to be pretty aggressive, I think. We had Darwinson on that list, but Ertz is a pretty elite back-end option. At least he has been for Miami this year. Was really good for them actually last year too, looking at him. So, Colorado strengthening that bullpen as always.
Yeah, it's a nice pickup. 70 stamina from a top-level reliever, super valuable there. Guy that can pitch 3 times a week.
Tyler.
Wow.
Looks like Buster Olney's weighing in on Twitter.
All right, so Buster, he's hearing some big names moving. Keisuke Hirano, who's maybe close to the biggest bat, but on a big deal, obviously in Toronto. Vargas, who might represent the best middle infield help we have. Jordan, who is probably the biggest power bat we have for sure at the deadline. And Givatoski, that's going to be the interesting one. I saw that block he posted, both him and Quack. It just seemed to me Givatoski was just a tad bit more likely to move, given where they were. But yeah, I'm sure he was fielding a lot of offers for him. So that'll be excited to see as these start going. Nice typo from Buster there, starting to hear up.
Buster or John Heyman?
They got to get it out.
A guy you just mentioned just got word he's been dealt. Darwinson Hernandez from the Nashville Outlaws. He's going to the Montreal Expos in exchange for Chris Snyder.
Yeah. So right. I mean, at least for me, the best reliever on the market. That was an obvious sell, right? He's a very high movement, high control there. High movement, high stuff, I should say. Been in Montreal before, had success in Montreal before. He's, well on his way to the ERA, I guess, has gotten back up over 3, but back-to-back years under 3 before this. And for a kind of high leverage specialist lefty, I don't know how you could do much better at the deadline. So a strong bullpen getting even stronger there in Montreal. Any additional thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I was just looking up the reliever he got in return. Kind of like a low stuff reliever, but incredible movement. Always seems to overperform his ratings too. Guy you picked up in return there, a lot of 1 and 2 and 3 FIPS across all the way from rookie ball right to AAA, and ton of low movement home run numbers at 0.6 and per 9 and lower. So looks like that got a nice little piece there. Could be a potential solid middle reliever in my opinion.
Yeah, Buster's he's got his Twitter fingers going. He's weighing in again for us, giving us a little additional update on the market.
All right, teams the most active so far: Orioles and Outlaws on the sellers. The Orioles are an interesting one for me. They kind of seemed like they were. Dan can probably talk to better, but a little bit in a stand pat place as they kind of build up what's a good system. The Outlaws have some very nice pieces that we've touched on to sell off. Braves, as always, amongst the buyers at this deadline, and Detroit making a lot of calls. I'm not surprised in the least. Nick, any insight into how those calls are going?
Most of them didn't go well.
Straight to voicemail for Nick.
Some of them.
We'll keep the deals flowing here. A couple of crosstown rivals, Nick's hometown, the Cubbies and the White Sox. Chicago dealing. Cubs received Dan Pimentel, starting pitcher, in exchange for a couple of prospects there.
Oh, okay.
Now Pimentel, I can't remember recently, but he was good young. How do you spell that last name?
Pimental.
Oh, okay. Yeah, high stuff, high control guy. Two really strong pitches for him. Has struggled in Chicago this year. Has struggled actually for the last couple seasons, but good ratings, right? I mean, that guy could play up to ratings easily and be a little better for Cubs team that has it's actually underperformed, right? Stanton, who's been a front runner for the Cy, hasn't been his normal self this year, so some added depth to that rotation, making my wild card hopes looking worse and worse by the second. But any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I like him as a big time stuff guy in the bullpen. That fastball slider always plays up there. I guess he can obviously be a starter too, but yeah, that guy would be an absolute weapon in the bullpen, I think.
Yeah, keeping the deals moving. Philadelphia Phillies, Dan talked about the incredible season they're having. Adding to that potent lineup here, they're acquiring Ernesto Adames from the Boston Red Sox in exchange for pitching prospect Mike Campbell.
Interesting, kind of a buyer trade here. Adames it'll be interesting if this kind of, translates into something for the Red Sox at the corner outfield, as we kind of mentioned, that being a spot for them. Phillies aren't great defensively in the outfield, but they got bats in the outfield for sure. So a little extra addition there, a guy who can play the corner outfield spots pretty well. Having a solid year in Boston. So that's an interesting one for the Red Sox. It'll be interesting to see if that triggers anything else. Any thoughts there?
It would be surprising if it didn't. He's been pretty key for them, and obviously they're in the thick of it. I hope it doesn't come to anything else as one of the AL wild card teams, but we'll see.
Yeah, kind of a righty masher there. If you look at hit the ratings tab there, Zach, that Ernesto Adams has a pretty big split. So I think that's in Philly, it gives him another big power bat from the left side. That 60 power, 60 I versus righties. Another impact bat out there. I think Zach Veen was out there last I looked for Philly in the right field, so pretty nice upgrade over him, I'd say.
Yeah, and Buster weighing in again. Tyler, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Two organizations who historically hate each other could be linking up to strike a deal. Fascinating, working to confirm details. Interesting, right? I assume Zach speaking to the organizations, not the GMs in this, or Buster, I should say, not Zach. Buster is speaking to the organizations here, not the GMs. Maybe a little, maybe a little outfielder, maybe a little Parker Meadows to Boston, or I'm trying to think something along those lines that would make some sense. But any thoughts on what this could be?
First thing that popped to my mind was Miami just constantly hitting Acuna in real life, so potentially a Miami-Atlanta link up. Who knows? Those two teams seem to have all-out brawls all the time.
Tigers trading for Carmouche, I imagine.
That would certainly fit the criteria. Another deal coming in here, working to confirm. Braves back at it. Another Chicago and Atlanta deal. Juan Rubalcaba, the young corner infield prospect, heading to the White Sox in exchange for outfielder Dave Munoz.
So yeah, White Sox proving probably the most active team here so far. Munoz is a really nice bat. Another former first round pick getting moved here at the deadline. Struggling a little bit in Chicago this year, but as he's kind of looking to clear up some room, the Braves. It's a guy with control, and I know the Braves outfield is a lot of rental deals out there. So this may be kind of one for the future for them. Any insight into that prospect they got back?
Looks like a pretty solid third. Well, looks like he's a first baseman long term, but solid all around bat. Doesn't have the power you'd want out of a first baseman, but he's still 22 and seems to be trending up a little bit.
Looks like he was a $2.5 million signing back in 2026. Yeah, not a bad.
Interesting. If you look at these, almost all the potential ratings are almost the same as Munoz's as the currents. You got that kind of high approach with the 45 power and 50 contact, so kind of similar type ceilings, I'd say.
Tyler, it looks like our favorite John Heyman's going to confirm what you kind of speculated on earlier.
John Heyman.
So maybe it's right.
Yeah, 50-50. Oh shit, Tyler nails it.
Yeah,
wow.
can confirm the Boston Red Sox have acquired Parker Meadows from the New York Yankees in exchange for Alex Verdugo, Alex Puente, and Ricky Munoz.
Okay, that's an interesting pull from me. That was kind of out of nowhere. So, yeah, that makes sense, right? With Adames moving and now even Verdugo moving, needed a guy. I love Parker Meadows. I think he's a great outfielder, great ad for them. Probably got to make the money balance there with Verdugo. But he's a really nice upgrade there. Guy who was putting up 4 WAR seasons on the regular when he was in Kansas City and they didn't have much offense there. So. Really like that ad for the Red Sox. Any insight into the return they got back?
Two pretty solid looking international complex guys. They're both 17.
Yeah,
Puente has really nice contact to him, but needs to develop some more power, but we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, that center fielder, 40 contact, but he's kind of the opposite. He has that low contact with the super high eye and home run power with the big time range in center field. So that's one of those real volatile prospects. It could be a 4-4, 5 WAR guy, but pretty risky. Probably like a 20% chance to turn into a star.
Yeah, so we're 8 minutes away from the deadline. I just want to reiterate, if you do DM me and I haven't responded, I haven't even opened Slack. Do not panic. Some people like to panic. Do not panic. It will count as long as it's timestamped before 9 p.m. I will get to it on this show. We have a number of trades, though, in the queue right now. We'll jump out to Milwaukee, the Brewers, that they're adding to that talented roster. They struck a deal with the New York Mets, receiving Ryan Amin, the highly coveted Ryan Amin. Catcher Hayden Travinsky and a little bit of cash in exchange for the 3 names you see on your screen.
Yeah, just keep the trend going with now this is way back 2023 first round pick, but just 27 in AAA. Ryan Amin, big time stuff, movement guy. Got a little bit of a backup catcher option there too. It appears for catcher market. We didn't have any in our top 25, so pretty thin there. Some interesting prospects go the other way. I know I at least remember, at least when we talked through our prospect ranking, that Dave Macias was pretty high up there in terms of catcher prospects. So I think he's probably a good part of that return. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm looking at Macias right now. I really like him. Defensively, he's not exactly what you'd want out of a catcher, but that bat could be a major player at catcher.
Yeah, I was eyeing him in a trade recently too. I don't think he wanted to budge on him. A pretty high level talent. And then Harrelson, just a big corner bat. Looks like a right fielder. Got 50s across the board potential wise. 19 years old, so just another young piece there to add to the Mets' highly talented prospect pool, full of guys around that age. So they're just going to be even more stocked after a few more of these trades.
all these first round picks going this year. Man, a lot of former ones. Almost every deal has been one so far.
Baltimore Orioles. Another former first round pick. Speaking of them, Carter Boyd heading to the Milwaukee Brewers. Brewers strike big for a couple of former first round arms.
Okay, yeah. Brewers making a lot of moves to bolster what's a really good staff already. Yeah, I mean, Dan, you can talk to Boyd, probably the best. I'm not sure it was a guy you were, particularly positive you were going to move here, but obviously got a return to your liking there.
Yeah, Boyd wasn't performing too well for me. He seemed to be angry at the organization, which a lot of people seem to be at Baltimore in real life. I got a couple guys I really like. There's a few teams interested in Boyd, and I just fell in love with the prospect of those two. Lind is a highly rated guy that was performing very badly in the A-ball. Had a lot of bad chemistry stuff going on with that team. He's angry, so he didn't seem to be playing up to his ratings, but a guy that I thought had number 4 or 5 starter, pretty solid guy written all over him, and I just really like that infielder Morton. Morton didn't really have a huge ceiling, not a lot of power, but I just thought he was a really good utility guy that played at a 35 power, kind of like a plus approach, 60 range, 60 arm, turn double play type thing. So could almost survive a shortstop, more of a second base utility guy, kind of player all around the field. So just like something about that return. Those two guys just kind of both look like back end 26-man roster pieces that I thought I'd pull the trigger on. Nothing crazy, but just a couple solid guys.
If I can keep this mind meld going with Zach, I'm going to guess the Tigers are up for the next one.
No, actually, we've got some pretty big breaking news here, Tyler. I'll let you take it. Jeff Passan just tweeting just now.
All right. Oh, big time news. Dylan Ray to the Atlanta Braves. Well, Dan, you mentioned it. It's a good staff. They could use the number one with Gore falling a little bit off. A guy who can win playoff games and an ex-Cy Young winner. So, if true, big time ad there for and Passan's pretty good history there. So I would expect so. All right. So yeah, there it is, Dylan Ray. And, he was shopped pretty heavily. It was kind of a best deal gets him type situation. Mike Evans, I'm familiar with being a really big time stuff arm. I know. The other two, not as familiar with. Any insight on that return?
Guess we'll kick it to Zach here.
Yeah. So
what you kind of liked about those guys?
Well, it was tough to give up Mike Evans for. What am I going to get? 6 starts out of Dylan Ray plus the postseason. I'm not sure that I'll be able to re-sign him. But the main goal is to keep the World Series title in Atlanta. So anytime you can acquire a starter of this caliber, it was a no-brainer for me. Martinez, I think, is a solid bat. Not sure he'll ever play much of a role at the major league level. Tim Ward was a guy that I drafted and I liked. But the big return here for Oakland is definitely Mike Evans.
First real blockbuster. I think that's I guess Darwin's in, so 2 of the top 10 names now can be checked off. But yeah, it'd be interesting if Evans comes into that profile. Looks a lot like that reliever for the Dodgers right now, who is the number 2 prospect, that Hong guy with kind of just the elite level stuff. Now he has 380 pitches and Evans are a bit under, but if that can work, if any of those actually looks a lot like Botex for me.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
First round pick.
If those can get up there, that'll be a nice addition for them. Big time strikeout potential.
Buster only touched on it earlier. It's definitely a pitcher's selling market right now. The Minnesota Twins have acquired Ian Anderson from the New York Yankees in exchange for Kurt Short and Dan Canedo.
So Yankees doing a good job here, right? Couple of their big names that had a little bit of money attached to them. Obviously, got to retain a bit on Anderson, but getting some good returns for their guys. Twins, they're having a great first year campaign out of Moya. But the staff could always use an upgrade, and Anderson's a good number 3 middle of the rotation arm. Struggling a bit this year for the Yankees. Tough park to pitch in, obviously, but should be a nice add for them. Nick, thoughts about that kind of in your realm?
Just the type of trade the Twins needed to get. Just keep adding to that depth. They gave up some solid prospects. The pitcher, what was it, Kurt Short? He looks like a reliever. I'm not sure that he'll ever have a changeup come along. 2031 third round pick. He is a lefty, and he throws hard, and his movement is borderline elite. So I think he'll be a pretty good one. Kaneda is a solid looking catcher. 19 years old, I think.
Yeah, keeping it going. As we approach the deadline, we're within a minute here. The Jeff Passan weighing in again on Dan's Baltimore Orioles. Looks like they've struck a deal to acquire Nate Stevens from the Texas Rangers.
Nice. Yeah. Dan, you can probably talk to it. I like Stevens a good bit, but this is probably some insurance for the impending Kyle Teal departure.
Yeah, this move was more so for next year for me personally than this year to contend. I didn't. I noticed a lot of the top catchers in the league have dropped off lately. Across the board, we have a lot of the like Adley Rutschman, some of those older guys, the real life guys. Almost all the top four, I'd say. Joey Bart's defense has fallen off a bit, and there's even Herrera and St. Louis started to lose some ratings. So when I was really looking in depth at the catchers recently, I noticed Stevens, in my opinion, was one of the top 10, and I saw he's under contract for 2 more years at $8 million. And I knew I was losing Kyle Teal because I have to keep an owner's goal, and I couldn't re-sign him. So I figured Stevens is a guy that I could platoon with my nice young righty bat catcher that's coming up next year. So I just thought that was a real good fit for me. I could afford him, and I thought he'd be one of the top 15 catchers in baseball for sure. So, and I also really like Monty Harrison. I know, I just thought his story was really cool. If you look at Monty Harrison, he's 36 years old, and he's only got 1 year service time, and he's actually got some pretty booming tools, big time power, big time range, really good against lefty pitchers. Monty Harrison, I think, had like a 130 WRC plus this season against lefties. So I thought he's a guy who could plug into center field and the corner spot against lefties and give me pretty solid level. And they also, Stevens was a captain, and then Harrison's very popular. So just a couple things that really helped have a small budget team, low fan interest. So this kind of move, I think, like I said, mainly centered around Stevens, having him locked up as my starting catcher next year, I really like. So I thought it was worth giving up a couple of mid prospects, even though I'm kind of rebuilding and should be adding to my prospect pool. Just a couple guys I didn't really want to pass on. So deal I kind of like for that reason.
I had to look up Monty Harrison to see what all those all-stars were from. Obviously, it's playing a lot of league baseball and such, but yeah, that's quite a tool set to get out of a 36-year-old.
Yeah.
The Chicago White Sox continuing to clean house here. They've sent reliever Braxton Ashcraft to the Minnesota Twins in exchange for Rogelio Lastras and Kevin McLaughlin.
Yeah, so Ashcraft, another guy who I think has been in their rotation this year a good bit, if I remember correctly. I'm pulling him up now. Yeah, pretty good ratings on a solid starter. Should be could be a solid back end piece. Twins add Kennedy, and now they add Ashcraft. Maybe he slots in better as a reliever for them, but has the ability to do both. So maybe he's a swingman fifth starter type for them. But yeah, adding depth on the pitching side for the Twins, probably their most, out of finding a replacement for Clase in the short term, probably their most pressing need. So I think another good addition and another good job by Chicago continuing to bolster what's already a really strong system there.
So we have hit the deadline. The deals are still coming in. We have a number to get through. I'll fly through a couple of the minor ones here real quick. The Atlanta Braves, another deal, busy day for them. Gil Luna from the Blue Jays in exchange for Kevin McCollum. I know Luna is out, I think, until the month of September, and then he's a pending free agent. But a lefty option for the stretch run for the Braves. And that's a fairly big one coming in now. The Arizona Diamondbacks, we haven't touched on much tonight. Getting one of our top names, Alexander Vargas, going to the Arizona Diamondbacks in exchange for Robert Pinon and Ron Hayton.
Yeah, that's a really nice ad for the Diamondbacks. A place of need for them too, in the middle infield there. Really like that. They're kind of dead in the hunt of it right now. Um, wasn't sure where Vargas would land. Really, I think maybe Chicago was my top spot, but really like that fit. In just a really good defender for them, just plugging that middle infield. I think that's a big time addition there for the Snakes.
I love it. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the league, so this will be a huge boost for them.
Yeah, that really completes their lineup.
Buster Olney weighing in again.
Oh boy, of course not, right? Braves still going. We touched on earlier, right? They moved Barnes out, and that kind of clears a hole at first base, and that would be my guess of where it comes next for them. But yeah, I'm not expecting things to be done there either. So I'm with Buster on that one.
New York Yankees sending out prospect Edwin Suarez to the Kansas City Royals in exchange for $1 million. Little bit of an interesting profile, 17 years old. If you guys want to offer your thoughts on him real quick.
Yeah, he looks like he's got, very interesting. Throws two changeups. You don't see that very often. A changeup and a circle change in a profile. But looks like he has some. It's a long way to go, but looks like he has some nice potential to him. The stamina is a bit low, but that'll be a fun buy for $1 million. A guy that would probably get that at the July 2 deadline. So probably a solid buy there for the Royals, who develop pitching quite well.
Yeah, you like to see that high work ethic intelligence combo and those super young complex guys that really ups their chances, I'd say.
Tyler, I'll turn this over to you as we head back to the Twitter sphere. John Heyman weighing in on the St. Louis Cardinals.
All right, Cardinals acquiring Devin White. I'm not really familiar. Unless they're a football team, all of a sudden, I'm not quite familiar with what the Cardinals are doing. But yeah, interesting from Heyman there. I imagine he's messed up once again with that one. But we'll see what
Can
comes out of
confirm.
that.
Can confirm. John Heyman once again has messed up.
Evan, naturally, Evan White. Yes, that makes a lot more sense.
That's good.
Yeah, right. The Cardinals, man. It's like the best retirement home of all time, right? That's like the oldest team ever, but they're all so good. Evan White, as Dan kind of profiled him earlier, elite first baseman, good left fielder. That's a really nice bat out here on the market right now. Good personality to add to a locker room, having a good year in Nashville. Frees up some things for Nashville too. They're a little corner position heavy at the moment, so like that ad a lot for the Cardinals and selling by the Outlaws there.
Yeah, big name, big profile. Maybe hasn't lived up to the profile yet, but getting word that the Boston Red Sox have acquired a name that I don't think anybody would have expected to be available at this deadline. Chad Johnson from the New York Mets, the center fielder, heading to Boston.
Ooh, big one there.
Love that. I think last time I looked, he was underperforming a bit this year, and I think he was kind of far and away their best offensive player coming into the season. Another outfield ad. That's going to be a fun outfield there in Boston with him and Meadows now coming. They're going to have range for days. That's going to be really fun. Did not think he would have been available, but then again, he doesn't quite fit. Approaching 26. Probably just a touch out of range with the Mets timeline. You might catch him on the back end of it, but that's another really nice bat to add. Big fan of that one. Any other thoughts there?
One of the prospects going back, Danny Rojas, he's a really interesting one. He's 22 years old, about to be 23. He looks like he's ready to go today. Decent power, great gap power, good contact, shaky eye, but other than that, he looks like a really good first baseman with speed.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Bermudez and Castillo, kind of big bats there are those two guys. Still is kind of a catcher with 45 ability, big time bat. A couple $1 million never hurts with a small payroll Mets getting some money back.
The Philadelphia Phillies may be answering the bell to the Atlanta Braves right now. They've acquired starting pitcher Edwin Davila from the Cincinnati Reds along with Francisco Perez in exchange for Andy Fritz and Bobby Menjivar.
Yeah, Davila's another interesting one. Fitz, the Phillies were a little weak at like the fifth starter spot, right? If anything, they haven't really found a guy to plug that hole. Davila's better than a fifth starter, but that's a really strong rotation all of a sudden. Guy who had a lot of early career success, if I remember correctly, in San Diego, right? He exploded on the scene, 18 wins in his rookie year. Has struggled a little bit in the past 2 seasons, playing on some, not really competing teams. So maybe being on a Phillies team will help him out a bit, but that's a nice ad.
It continues the theme of a first rounder being traded to 2031 first rounder Andy Fritz.
Yes.
They've worn out their welcome.
Both prospects going back look pretty promising too.
So now we got a big move out of St. Louis, a couple from Atlanta and one from Philly. So Dodgers quiet so far are the top 4 from the NL.
John Heyman weighing in once again on Twitter. Tyler, I'll let you take over.
Oh boy, my glasses. Toronto to the
Oh my God.
Toronto to the Spiders. Oscar Arroyo back to the Blue Jays.
Don't like it.
That would be too wild. Yeah. Well, I don't know the Spiders roster well enough, but that'd be a lot of corner bats, right? When it feels like they're trying to give them up. So that'd be an interesting ad and a lot of money to take on. So I'm going to guess Heyman continues his trend here, but we'll see.
Yep. Loves that contact on him.
Atlanta Braves, once again, another deal for the Braves, this time linking up with the San Diego Padres, acquiring Caleb Tuzio in exchange for Wilder Patino, Jorge Garces, Juan Soto, and Alexis Mejia.
Yeah, that's a big bat, right? I mean, Tuzio is stuck in, maybe the worst part for him to hit in, which is, tragic when you look at his profile and how good he is. So that's a big time bat ad that obviously very much fills that first base hole we were talking about for the Braves with the Barnes departure. He's actually hitting pretty well there this year too, near 800 OPS. So in terms of that return, I know I'd seen Garces' name up high before, but I imagine to get a guy like Tuzio, it's a pretty solid return going back the other way.
Juan Soto going to the San Diego Padres.
Gotta like that.
Yeah, it's a big ceiling relief pitcher arm, and then Patino, the pro-ready guys. 4 for 1.
Jeff Passan weighing in again on Twitter, contradicting John Heyman. Tyler, if you want to take it over.
If I had to guess a side, I'd go with passing on this. So the Blue Jays in agreement to send Keisuke Hirano to the Tigers for Ryan Joyner and a prospect package. That's a fun one. I've never personally been particularly high on Joyner. I know I've talked to Nick about that before, and Hirano is big time. And an offense that is hitting the ball well, but even a little bit more of a boost there could be epic for their chances. So, especially as we start to trend here, big prospect return going back the other way. Nick, I'm sure you're probably more familiar with these guys than I am.
Very familiar. Some of them probably were, 3 of them particularly were really close to being on the roster, being Juan Medina, Chris Delaney, who probably would have been my next 2 pitchers up. And Billy Holland's been good to go, but I have a man crush on Danny Dudley as my 4th outfielder. Very excited to get Hirano. I've been searching for a bat like this for years. And very glad he's not in Cleveland. He's going to go right in the middle of the order. Hopefully that power continues, because that's something we could really use. Joyner unfortunately couldn't stay healthy this year. He will be missed. We thank him for what he did in the playoffs last year, but it was time to move on and grab one of the best hitters in baseball.
Yeah, Cam about broke my heart when he signed Hirano, and I've reached in intermittently about potentially getting him back once the Blue Jays turned it down a bit. Heyman admitting his faults, that's always good to see. So yeah, it's I've always reached out on Hirano, and unfortunately this was not a year the Giants deserved such an upgrade. So I'm interested to see and excited to see what he does in Detroit.
Me too.
How about the Cleveland Spiders? Other than the false report from John Heyman, we haven't heard much from them tonight. It looks like they are on the board, linking up with a fellow American League rival of theirs, the Milwaukee Brewers, acquiring Kevin
Wow.
Bailey.
Ooh, interesting. Kevin Bailey, yeah, definitely. Actually familiar with Kushner as well as the potential high leverage reliever. Kevin Bailey is a pretty nice arm. He's been, with that 80 stuff potential, at least for me, really not pitching well at all in Cleveland this year. But and for my money, the Brewers might have the best catcher in baseball. So if there's ever a guy to catch him, that's probably the guy. That Brewers staff is almost unfairly good now with all the additions they've made. So that's a really strong looking team. But yeah, Spiders, kind of like Ray was in Baltimore for you, Dan. Obviously not getting it done there, so best to cut ties and figure it out. But any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was just looking up that arm, or the bat. You said the arm, and then Valencia, the bat there, just a nice, looks like a first base left fielder type DH, potentially corner bat. And Valencia was 60 power there. So just, a couple nice young prospects for a guy that wasn't playing too well for Cleveland. So not a big loss there from a zero WAR guy. But yeah, that gives 280 stuff guys to Milwaukee. So some major strikeout juice coming to their already good bullpen. So that's going to be tough to deal with.
All right, and I don't have this one typed up, but it looks like this is just coming across the desk now. The LA Dodgers are on the board. They've
There we go.
acquired outfielder Victor Olvera from the Kansas City Royals in exchange for starting pitcher Mike Morales.
Olvera's an interesting one if I remember correctly. I think he has some two-way to him. I think he pitches in relief sometimes too. Yeah. So yeah, that is the guy I'm thinking about. Probably best as a good defender in left or right, but 65 range for me, so can get away with it. That's a pretty elite contact, speed profile. A lot of poor man's Juan Vasquez in that profile. So like that a lot as an addition. It's been the best offense, maybe not in baseball, but in the NL for sure. So it'll be interested to see if that guy pitches any there, but maybe he will as a fourth outfielder or something like that. So good pickup there.
Yeah, I'm shocked to see that low bat pip on a guy with that good of speed and contact and pretty solid gap power. If he's 260 bat pip right now, that guy should be closer to 360. So maybe just a lot of bad luck this year or something on the offensive side of things.
It looks like the Braves aren't quite done yet. We got another one coming in, linking up with the Washington Nationals. Omar Fernandez and Tyler Soderstrom heading to Atlanta in exchange for Patrick Wicklander, Jonathan Rodriguez, Josh Somerville, and Tony Palacio.
Yeah, no wonder Zach wanted the show back so badly. Yeah, so Fernandez was a name I reached out on too because man, he fits a nice void for a lot of teams. You gotta like a lefty who with that type of movement, fairly affordable, well, especially with some retainment as an expiring, pitching very solidly for Washington this year. So. Like that, Soderstrom as a backup catcher. The catcher market was thin as all get out at the deadline. So people finding some pieces like you, Dan, with Stevens and Soderstrom here to just kind of fill some voids. But yeah, that's another good pickup for the Braves. Really like Fernandez and strengthening that staff along with Ray now to do at this deadline.
Jonathan Rodriguez was the prize for Washington here. Just to touch on him real quick. I feel like nearly every team that I reached out to that sent me a list of players wanted him in return. He was one of the most coveted players in my system. I just shout out to Patrick. Easy deal. Looks like we have more coming in. I don't have this one written up. Looks like Ricky Perez from the Kansas City Royals is heading to the Chicago White Sox. So the White Sox doing a little bit of buying here in exchange for Montoya. I don't have a first name. That's always makes it fun. Relief pitcher Montoya heading to the Royals in exchange for Ricky Perez.
Perez is at least for me a very interesting name. He almost made my top 20 list at this deadline. And my scout even likes him a touch more than OSA does. A really nice third base, second base defender. Maybe not the range for second base, but at third base, gotta love that profile. Should hit pretty well too, especially if what I'm seeing is right on him. Be interesting to see what that means exactly if he gets extended in Chicago. I'm not exactly sure what that all means in the landscape there, but
good
player. I'm a big fan of his. Any thoughts?
I'm assuming this
I
is.
found him.
I'm assuming
Alex
this is the
Montoya.
reliever. Yeah. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
No, I was just saying the same thing. A+ there, Alex Montoya. I was kind of searching through their system there. Must be the return. Pretty good stats on him so far this season.
I think if I remember correctly, when Perez left Nashville for Kansas City, he was not particularly enjoyed organizationally by teammates. So maybe that has something to do with this move as well.
So we are now 20 minutes post deadline. Deals are still trickling in. Any thoughts on the top 25? Who moved? Who didn't move to this point? You guys want to recap it all?
Sure. Yeah. No, there's been some interesting ones, right? So Ray, we're pretty sure was going to move, and he gets moved off the board. I think elsewhere in that top 25, Fernandez, Vargas, Darwinson, Hernandez were all top 10 guys. There's two still really interesting pitchers for me. Givatoski not mentioned, right? Forrest Whitley also in Houston is a really nice arm. Houston noticeably quiet, right, as a seller. I think all these other sellers have done a really good job for these pieces. Houston not as much there, so it'll be interesting if anything late comes in on that front. Kind of similarly on the seller front, the Angels I thought had some nice pieces. Luis Urias is one. Some of those relievers too, Zach Britsky, Feltman in that bullpen. So any other thoughts there on the top 25 guys?
Mario Zabala is still out there.
Everyone's golden child.
Well,
I think.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh yeah, I was going to say a couple names I still really like. I think Abdul Mondesi there for KC. I think there's not too many really good infielders on the market. He's a guy that can play a few spots, so I thought he might be moved. And I really like the Joaquin Cabrera. If you look at Joaquin Cabrera this season, over 400 on base percentage for him in Nashville. I know Nashville's been pretty active, so that's a guy that I thought might move here. So we'll see what happens in the next few moves. But I think Caleb Tuzio at the end there also moves. So a couple. Bob Bickford there, big time relief pitcher still on the board for Cincy. That's a guy I was kind of expecting to move too.
This one, literally just before the deadline. Nashville, once again, with Boston. Boston continuing to add. It's a pretty big one. Let me get it pulled up here for you. I don't have it typed out, but Andy Law is heading to the Boston Red Sox in exchange for Isaias Orta, Danny Grijalva, and Chris Logan. A couple of pitchers and a second baseman.
I do know I love Orta. I know that about the return after looking at him, so I'll be interested to see his profile pulled up. But Lowell's a pretty, maybe it's slotted as a miss right for Nashville at second overall in 2030. He's been good, but I still think at 24, better days ahead of him. Obviously, got to pay a big price for that type of return. A guy who's, with an 80 fastball and 4+ secondary pitches. I don't even think 40 control kills you as a starter. I think he's plenty fine. So that's a really nice stuff movement combo. But I do definitely know on the return, Orta is a pretty elite high prospect there.
Number 8 currently.
And like Nick was saying earlier, another former first-round pick on the move. Andy Lowell's second overall pick. Quite a bit of those moving today.
And
Yep, Orta not far off too, and a little different with the movement being the lower piece for him, but for a Boston team that's competing, he's not quite there while Lowell is there. So I think a move that makes a ton of sense for both of them. So I like that a lot.
And everybody's been waiting. The number one name, Thomas Givotofsky. Will he move? Will he not move? He has moved. I'm getting word. He has been dealt to the St. Louis Cardinals.
Oh, wow.
That's not nice. Okay. Now that's a fun return. That's a really fun return. I know just looking at it quickly. In particular, Hag is one of the best. We were touching on him. He's not really he's not a prospect anymore because he started up as kind of a util infielder. But one of the best young shortstops I think we're going to have here in a couple of years. But Givotofsky to the Cardinals is a front line. I mean, that creates a pretty scary 1-2-3 with May and Fierro. So yeah, that's a team that's looking real strong. That's going to be a fun battle down the stretch with them in LA at the top. But really like that ad. Think he's going to be great there. The Cardinals obviously can handle it financially. So big fan of that one. Excited to see him move. And the Marlins have done a good job, right? These last couple of years, they've moved off from a lot of big time players and done so at the right time, in my opinion, at least, while they're trying to rebuild. So big ad for the Cardinals.
Big prospects in that return too. That arm I was just looking at in that return, Perez, very similar profile to Givotowski, just a young version. Also has that real plus stuff and control combination. Also has the 45 movement, so a guy that could be kind of like a budgeted version of Givotowski one day. And then Marisic, last I checked, had like a 75 hit tool, super high end contact, high school bat from a couple drafts ago. So that's a pretty advanced profile. That's pretty much pro ready there in Perez. So really good fastball, high velo too. So that's a pretty high end pitching prospect. So you're definitely going to have to give up a lot of talented dudes if you're going to get the number one player in the trade market as ranked by us on the deadline. So I think that's a really good return for Miami.
Yes, I have worked. That is the final deal to come across tonight. Trading is officially closed. What do you guys think? Who won? Who lost? Who were you shocked to see move? Who were you disappointed to not see moved?
Mario Zavala.
Shocked. Absolutely floored. Right. So I mean, I think on the buyer front, you got to think most everyone made an upgrade. The Expos stood a little pat, right? Not that they're not the best team in baseball right now or close to it. Them and the Rockies, I think there was some thought they make a giant move, and they both really went for like some bullpen support. I think on the obvious winners front, I think at least for me, Boston sticks out in mind and how they kind of revamped that outfield. I am in love with adding Johnston and Meadows to that outfield. I think that's a really fun team down the stretch. But any other thoughts?
Milwaukee, the rich getting richer. That's going to be a very tough team to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, Atlanta too, man. Bringing in those two high-impact arms, getting Ray and the Cincy guy, I forget his name right now, but both those guys, real talented dudes. So that helps Atlanta try to compete with that top three. They might be able to even catch up to Philly there if they have a really good second half. Philly's got a nice little lead right now, but I know that Atlanta you probably want that bye on that first round. That Philly's kind of locked onto right now. But was it the Dodgers probably the only top 16 that didn't make a move at all?
They added Olvera right to the outfield, that Royals guy.
Oh, that's right.
but that was it. They stood fairly pat in comparison to the rest of those top teams. And I would say the Expos and Rockies kind of similarly didn't do anything too crazy active. Really, that wild card tier was really some strong places. I think the Cubs, you look at, made a lot of moves. Red Sox, Brewers, Diamondbacks with a great, one deal, but hey, make it a good one and go get Alexander Vargas. I love that for them. So on the buyer front, I think it was a really good deadline. I think, we've got kind of a split in the league, right, between a pretty clear split between the buyers and the sellers here. And I think those teams are really looking at the World Series as their big picture. So I think a lot of moves on that front. What about for the sellers? Anyone surprised not to move?
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned earlier, Houston, I thought, had a lot of pieces. I guess they're looking to compete pretty heavy next year, so maybe they didn't want to move on from Alvarez, and I know that center fielder is real good for them. Forrest Whitley was probably the most talented arm on the market overall, ratings-wise. So I thought they were a little surprised. I thought Kelenic potentially in Seattle might be on the move. He was getting a little older, has a lot of value, though. They're kind of competing, so they're a little bit on the fence, so I wasn't sure on him. And San Diego, I think holding on to Escorte kind of surprised me a bit. Not shocking, though, because his contract was pretty tricky. I think he has an opt-out after 2 years, so it's always tough to predict if a guy's going to opt out and give up a ton of prospects for 1 or 2 years of controls. Who else on that list? I guess Luis Urias also didn't move. The Angels held on to him. He has a big team option next year, a $12 million buyout, I think. So that was another tricky contract, so it kind of makes sense why those two didn't move.
Yeah, not many contenders had. Most contenders had under 10 million to work with. Some were even in the red. I was surprised with how active it was, with there being so many financial struggles, and people would have to try to move expiring contracts to make things work for the most part.
Excited to see how many trade voids we get after this from retention and such. But I'm sure they've all been validated. And but yeah, I'm kind of with everyone. I think, Dan, you're right. If Houston's planning on competing again soon, it makes sense for them not to move. But Alvarez, Jacob Gonzalez, and Whitley could have fetched a pretty nice return if people could have afforded it. So that was a good deadline, though. That was fun.
Yeah, all in all, I think we had over 30 deals after the final couple trickled in the DMs. I know we were at 27 that I preloaded onto OBS at 7:30 or so. Fun deadline. I thought the White Sox did really well, just selling off whatever they could for whatever they could get. I mean, that's the right mentality. They had a little bit of budget space, not much, but it enabled them the ability to retain and really get some deals done.
Yeah, a number of the sellers, right, I thought did a really good job. I think the Yankees made a ton of good deals. I think the Marlins did so as well. It's tough to find the right deal for a guy like that. Oakland was going to move Ray, and I think that was really the only piece there that moved. I think Nashville did a really nice job. They had a ton of pieces to move, but were pretty active in making all those work. So winners on both sides of things for sure. I think really in particular the Yankees in Nashville stick out as doing a really good job at this deadline for me.
The Ian Anderson trade was one that had to get done, and it enabled Connor to work financially even more. Big kudos to him for getting that done.
And Boston's aggressiveness, that was some really fun moves. Holy smokes, their team's going to look a lot different after this sim upload. Holy smokes. Did the White Sox make 5 moves, or was it 4? I lost track.
I don't have I could look, but
yeah. I think it was 4 or 5.
It was at least 4, yeah. And like I said, it was nobody major, but just he did I thought a good job of selling off what he could, and stacking that loaded farm even more.
It's gonna be a fun playoff stretch for sure.
So we're heading into the second half now. You guys have seen who did what, who loaded up. What are your predictions? Let's hear them.
Oh God!
It's
all right,
tough.
So in the AL, it feels like, oh my God, that wild cards. But I think the Spiders, we all think, are too talented to be there, right? So you almost pencil them in first just mentally, but the Red Sox and the Tigers and the Twins did a good job here too. All those teams right around that mark did a really good job at the deadline. You really only have the Brewers, Rockies, and Expos all but locked in. Even the Diamondbacks 6.5 back is a sneaky ad of Vargas, so that wild card's going to get real stressful. The NL one is not particularly going to get stressful, I don't think. The Cubs did a good job here. The Pirates are another team we didn't touch on. Quiet today, right? Obviously hamstrung financially being in Pittsburgh, but also with not knowing what the end in sight is for Howard and Pacheco. So a little tricky there, and they've been trending down a little bit recently. So nothing from the Rays or Giants, which is disappointing in and of itself for me, but nothing from the Rays either, who I thought could make some moves to try to, after he said he was competing, to make some moves to try to compete. So I'm going to say it stands pat in the NL, and in the AL, I'll flip the Tigers and the Twins, how it stands today.
So as of now, after today's sim, the LA Dodgers are a half game ahead of the St. Louis Cardinals. They're one up in the loss column. Who are you taking there?
I'll leave it to y'all. That's my I would hate to make them even madder and beat me even worse, so I'll give that to someone else.
I guess I got to give the tiebreaker to St. Louis, bringing in an ace, right? And then the Dodgers kind of staying pat and then losing their center fielder for a few weeks. And I don't, so I guess maybe that's a minor enough tiebreaker for me to give it to the St. Louis over the Dodgers. But yeah, that's close.
When Zabala was just sitting out there to go get.
Best player not traded.
Gotta be.
So.
Him or Jordan.
All right, and any final thoughts from you guys? Any final trade rumblings?
No, I loved having this back. This is always fun. So appreciate you going through all the effort of flipping all that stuff around and making up those tweets. I think, I saw some messages that makes it fun for people. So enjoy this crew, enjoy doing this as always. So yeah, that's it for me.
Dan, Nick, anything you guys want to add?
Go Tigers.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was gonna say, I hope this we can put this on YouTube if it's saved onto your Twitch. I think if you guys might have missed it, but yeah, that was a blast to go through for sure. Pretty action-packed deadline show.
Yeah, I am recording on OBS. It'll get rendered and all that overnight tonight. It'll probably be up sometime tomorrow. Quick apology about the beginning. I don't know what was going on. OBS was bugging out. I couldn't get the Zoom to appear for everybody to see. I tested it about 6 hours ago and everything was fine. Of course, you go to load it and it's not working. The appearance now, I mean, you can see I had a border, what the screen you guys were supposed to be in with the red border, but everything got messed up. But we powered through. I thought it was a good show overall. Thank you guys for the research and the thoughts and sharing them with the league and creating the content.
Thanks, guys.
Nick, I know you had the Tigers, but I just want to remind you.
Damn it.
Go Braves.
Poor guy.
All right, guys. I'll process these trades as soon as I get this video ended and file uploaded immediately after. Thank you guys again.